analysts have been warning of the dollar's impending
to the United States of America. It continues to struggle with a worsening inflation. Yet the bigger story and bigger worry.
Our next story is about America, specifically America's debt. It stands at $36 trillion. That's the debt, $36 trillion. That's what the US government owes.
Did you know that for the first time in 200 years, a 30-year-old American is now poorer than their parents were at the same age? What has happened to the American dream? In 2024, the United States reached a record national net worth of over $135 trillion. Yet, those under 40 own just 4% of it. The country has become richer, but its future might be getting poorer. What really happened to the promise that each generation would live better than the last? Let's find out. The American dream was once simple. Work hard, play fair, and you do better than your parents. That dream seems to be far gone for millions of young Americans today. The idea that each new generation climbs higher has been replaced with a quiet panic. What if we never reach the top of the ladder at all? Let's begin with the truth that is no longer debatable. According to data from the Federal Reserve, a large percentage of young adults born in the 1980s and early 1990s have accumulated far less wealth than those born just a decade earlier. A 2023 study by Statista found that American millennials control just over 9.4% of the country's wealth, despite making up more than 37% of the adult population. When you take a look at how it was 30 years ago for the baby boomers, that share of wealth was closer to 30%. The phrase starting from scratch has taken on a more literal meaning. In past decades, younger people in their 20s and 30s could expect to own a home, build savings, and support a family by their early 30s. Now, many Americans are still renting even at 35, living paycheck to paycheck and juggling debt with no clear path to building assets. And this isn't just a story of individual decisions, it's the result of how money and opportunity have been distributed over time. Wealth has become increasingly concentrated among the older generation of Americans. Since the early 1990s, these generations have witnessed a dramatic rise in their share of national wealth. As of 2024, baby boomers and Generation X still controlled over 70% of all household wealth in the United States. These numbers reflect more than financial planning. They reveal a system that has prioritized asset holders, especially homeowners and investors, while sidelining those who entered adulthood during economic crisis, rising costs, and stagnant wages. The 2008 financial crash hit millennials just as they were entering the workforce, and many couldn't find jobs, compelling them to take up underpaid roles that were far below their skill level. By the time Gen Z began graduating into the COVID-era economy in 2020, many of these jobs had disappeared, wages couldn't keep pace with rent, and inflation had started to erode every dollar they earned. And yet, when young people speak about these struggles, they're often met with myths like get on a budget, you spend too much on coffee, learn how to save. But is it all that easy? Let's take a closer look at the numbers. The average work week in 1995 was about 35 hours. Today, it's about 34 hours, a mere 3% difference. Productivity per worker, however, has increased nearly 70% since the 1990s. So young workers are, statistically, working just as hard and producing more value. In terms of spending, the narrative doesn't hold either, as studies from the Bureau of Labour Statistics show that younger generations spend less on household activities and physical goods than previous generations did. In fact, they spend a high proportion of their income on essential costs, such as housing, healthcare, and education, all of which have far outpaced wage growth. Meanwhile, older generations benefit from tax codes that favoured long-term capital gains, 1031 exchanges for real estate, and significant property appreciation, many of which were introduced during eras of inflation and reform that never extended to include the younger workforce. But perhaps the most disheartening factor isn't the numbers, but the emotional gap between generations. Young people are often told, "We had it worse," but the facts suggest otherwise. Adjusted for inflation, the costs of housing, healthcare, and education have skyrocketed in just 30 years, while median wages have barely budged. So, who is really to blame? A home is more than just a place to sleep. It is often the first tangible symbol of stability, independence, and growth. But for millions of young Americans today, home ownership is no longer a milestone, but a mirage. What once defined the middle class is now slipping further and further out of reach for the same middle class. And it's not just because prices are going high, it's because the entire game has changed. Let's begin with a startling number. In San Francisco, for example, one of America's most iconic cities, just 16 housing permits were approved in 2024, and out of those, 7 were single-family homes. We are talking about a city of 1 million residents in a metro area of over 7 million, just 16 house permits. Across the country, this trend repeats under a movement known as "Not in my backyard." It's a mentality that has swept through communities, especially affluent suburbs, where homeowners fight tooth and nail to block any new housing projects from being built near them. Whether it's due to traffic concerns, school overcrowding, or simply the desire to preserve neighbourhood character, the result is the same. Fewer homes get built, demand increases, and prices skyrocket. According to data from Freddie Mac, the United States is currently short of about 3.7 million housing units. Yet, despite this overwhelming need, zoning restrictions, local resistance, and political gridlock continue to choke supply. However, the challenge goes beyond local governments. A new force has stepped into the housing market, driven solely by profit. They are the private equity firms. They now control over 2 million housing units across the country. These companies focus on Sunbelt cities like Tampa, Phoenix, and Atlanta, buying up large groups of homes and turning them into corporate rentals. CoreLogic reports that in some neighbourhoods, over half of the homes are owned by investment firms. These private equity companies are different from typical landlords. They pay in cash, offer large sums, and can easily outbid regular home buyers by tens of thousands of dollars without hesitation. And what's the result? Young families can no longer compete, and first-time buyers are pushed out before they can even make an offer. And it gets worse. These firms don't just profit from ownership, they also manipulate rent prices. The situation has created a new renter class, one that may never be able to escape. With home prices rising and wages remaining stable, most young Americans are spending about 45% of their income on rent alone. That leaves little room for much savings, emergencies, or down payments. Meanwhile, older homeowners are staying silent as over 44% of them own their homes, while the rest are locked into low interest rates they secured many years ago. Thanks to housing tools like HELOCs, they can maximise their home's equity value without ever needing to sell it. Thus, empty bedrooms sit untouched in oversized homes, while young people cram into overpriced apartments or move back in with their parents. So, what happens when an entire generation becomes renters for life by design, not by choice? For decades, going to college was sold to Americans as the most straightforward path to a better life. The promise was simple and linear: get a degree, work hard, and you'll earn more, live better, and secure a place in society. But for millions of young people today, that promise has not just faded, it has actually backfired. The cost of higher education has skyrocketed, and the debt tied to pursuing that dream has become a crushing weight that influences nearly every life decision. In 1980, the average annual cost of attending a 4-year public college, adjusted for inflation, was below $10,000. In recent years, that figure has risen to nearly $50,000. Private colleges cost, on average, over $45,000 per year before financial aid. These numbers often don't include housing, textbooks, or other fees. The increase is not just significant, it's disproportionate to every other aspect of American life. While education costs have tripled, median household income has grown only modestly, and the gap between what students pay and what they gain has become unsustainable. So what's driving this explosion in cost? The single answer is administrative bloat. From 1970 to 2022, college enrollment in the United States grew to 15 million. During the same period, the number of full-time faculty members increased by 92%, while non-teaching administrative staff grew by over 452%. Colleges began hiring more marketing departments, diversity consultants, mental health coordinators, event planners, and other professionals who, while not unnecessary, have significantly added to the operating costs of these institutions. At the same time, new construction projects ranging from luxury dorms to student centres and sprawling athletic facilities became the norm on campuses competing for students. The result is that higher education became more like a business and less like a place of learning. So, as the cost of getting a degree is skyrocketing, the wage premium for holding that degree is mostly stalled. In 1980, the average household with a bachelor's degree earned about $100,000 per year in today's dollars. Today, that figure has risen to $118,000, a modest increase of just 18%. Meanwhile, the cost of earning that degree has jumped by over 100%. Students are paying nearly twice as much to earn only slightly more. And that extra income is quickly consumed by the rent, healthcare, and debt they must pay. Talking about debt, as of 2024, Americans reportedly owe more than $1.7 trillion in student loan debt. That number has doubled in just the last 15 years and now surpasses all credit card debt in the country. Roughly 43 million Americans are carrying student loan balances, and for many, these loans stretch well into their 40s and 50s. The average student graduates with approximately $37,000 in debt, although many owe significantly more. Those who pursue graduate degrees, especially in fields like law or medicine, often finish school owing over $100,000. However, what makes this even more painful is how these loans shape people's lives after graduation. Young adults are delaying marriage and starting a family, not because they don't want these things, but because they simply can't afford them. Even those making decent salaries find themselves trapped between rising living costs and a monthly debt bill they can't escape. Bankruptcy laws do not often allow student loans to be easily discharged, so for many, the debt becomes a lifelong companion. At the same time, many American employers are now asking for more education than ever. Jobs that once required only a high school diploma now demand a bachelor's degree. Roles that used to be entry level now expect candidates to have graduate degrees and years of experience. The inflation of credentials doesn't always come with increased pay or responsibilities, just a new baseline. People are now spending more years in school, taking on more debt for jobs that no longer offer the kind of financial freedom previous generations enjoyed. Young Americans today are more likely to hold a college degree than their parents, but they are far less likely to own a home, build wealth, or retire with financial security. The dream of education leading to upward mobility has crumbled under the weight of poor economics, inflated promises, and policy decisions that favour lenders and institutions over students and their families. In all of these, how is the political sector influenced or still influences the American dream? While young Americans scramble to navigate a world of rising debt, shrinking opportunity, and delayed independence, the people making the decisions that shape their futures are doing so from a very different place in life. The age gap between those in power and those most affected by their policies has never been more pronounced than it is today. As of 2024, the average age of a United States Senator is 64, while the average age in the House of Representatives is 58. For reference, the median age of the American population is just 38. That means the people writing and voting on national laws are, on average, 2 decades older than the people those laws would affect the most. And it doesn't stop at the legislative branch. President Donald Trump is 78 years old, and Mitch McConnell, the former Senate Republican leader, is 82 years old. These are men who came of age when gas was 30 cents a gallon and homes cost under $30,000. When lawmakers are in the final chapters of their lives, they do not carry the same weight of long-term responsibility. Nowhere is this more evident than in the federal government's management of its finances. Since the removal of the gold standard in 1971, the USA has operated under a system where it can print as much money as it chooses. In the last 60 years, US government debt has grown 3 times faster than its GDP. That means Americans owe more than they produce in a year, which is a red flag in any economy. However, this number doesn't even account for what's to come. Social Security and Medicare, which primarily benefit older Americans, have $80 trillion in long-term unfunded liabilities. These are promises made without a clear means of funding them, adding state-level debt, unfunded pension liabilities, and other obligations. The total liability facing the US reaches a staggering $145 trillion. That's over 4 times the size of the economy. The consequences are already visible. Interest on the national debt now accounts for 16% of the federal budget, or approximately $624 billion annually. That's enough to erase all student loan debt in 3 years, yet it's being used to service loans instead of investing in the future. As more money is used to pay off interest, less is available for infrastructure, education, innovation, or climate solutions, things that could benefit future generations. This isn't just bad economics, it's a betrayal. Decisions that benefit the present at the expense of the future may win votes today, but they steal hope from tomorrow. And the question is, how much longer can that go on before an entire generation simply stops believing the system was ever meant to work for them? The American dream didn't fade out, it was taken. Stolen by rising debt, rigged housing, and leaders who might be stuck in the past. If there's any future left, it won't be handed down. It'll have to be reclaimed. Thank you for watching. Please like this video and hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with the channel. See you in the next video.